Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Cooking with Plants. So there's always a technical glitch. Well, I'm Kelly Wilson, and this is Cooking with Plants. And tonight we are focused on whole grains. Before we get into our content, I always like to start with a couple housekeeping things to hopefully help make this experience easier for folks. So just wanted to point out closed captions. If you're someone who would benefit from having closed captions during this experience, and you're joining us from a computer, you can go up to the top right-hand side of the Microsoft Teams platform. There's three little dots or ellipses. Select that, then select language, and then you can select turn on live captions, and you should text populate on the screen. If you have a question tonight, please feel welcome to put it in the Q&A box. Those are two overlapping little word bubbles that have the letters Q&A. Again, it's in that top right-hand side of your toolbar in the platform. If you're on your phone or your iPad, unfortunately, you have access to that function. So if we don't answer your question tonight, please send us an email at lifestylemedicine@trinity-health.org, and I'll be sure to respond there. If you are going to submit a question either via email or via the Q&A function, please make sure that it's associated with the content of the class and it's relevant to everyone maybe joining us this evening. If you are a Trinity Health colleague and you're joining us, you get Live Your Whole Life points to help keep your insurance premiums low. You get 250 points for attending this live class or to get your points, email lifestylemedicine@trinity-health.org, and I'll make sure you get what you need to your insurance premium low. I also always like to note that this class, while we're talking about plant foods, and plant foods are generally something that most people can eat a lot of and have no problems, a lot of the information that I'm going to be providing is general. So if you have a specific chronic illness that you're trying to manage, I highly recommend physician and your dietitian to dial in on the nutrition plan that is best for you, especially if you've been newly diagnosed with a chronic health condition. You want to make sure you're managing that condition well before making drastic changes in diet. That being said, a lot of the plant foods that we're working with are beneficial for chronic health conditions. I do use some ingredients like oil and salt that, depending on what you have going on, you may want to limit, but I'll always try to talk about other options when I'm using. And by this point, I should probably introduce myself. You're probably wondering who is here talking to you. Like I said, my name is Kelly Wilson. I am a registered dietitian and a board-certified lifestyle medicine practitioner, and I'm based in Southeast Michigan at Trinity Health Ann Arbor in our hospital lifestyle medicine clinic. If you are new to lifestyle medicine, it's a medical subspecialty that focuses on preventing, treating, and reversing chronic illness through 6 key pillars. Focus on a whole food, plant-forward dietary pattern, which is really what this class is all about. We talk to folks about regular physical activities, bodies every day, avoiding risky substances, getting good quality sleep, managing stress well, and then developing strong positive relationships. Strong evidence that all 6 of those pillars help us be our best selves and help prevent reverse stress. I'm very excited to be having the opportunity to teach this class because I think a lot of folks struggle with how to take fruits, vegetables, whole grains, or plant proteins, turn them into just easy meals, and that's what this class is. I really hope that you walk away from this experience loving a new food and feeling inspired and confident that you can. I truly believe anyone can cook, and this class is for you regardless of if you've never picked up a knife or you're, well versed in mise en place and all the culinary terms, spend hours in your kitchen. There's something for everybody in this class. And I hope that you also start to see that food is a creative outlet. It's fun. It's more than just nourishment. It's a wonderful tool for social connection, and we get to explore a lot of different cultures through food as well, and we'll do some tonight. And I also want to remind you, if you're this is something that you decided recently to work on, patient with yourself. Start with what you know. Start with your favorite recipe and start to kind of tweak and adapt them to add more of. And remember that change is not a linear process. It's like a roller coaster. It takes time. There'll be ups, there'll be downs. Just be patient and persistent. That is the most thing. Okay. And regardless of why you're here, I'm very excited that you are here, and I'm looking forward to tonight and in our future classes. This is our class schedule. We're here live on Microsoft Teams the second Wednesday of every month from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. We also record these classes, so if you have to miss a class or you can't join us live, you can enjoy that recording. This is that schedule, and that QR code will take you to the registration page. If this meeting was forwarded to you and you don't have registration, please scan that QR code so that I can make sure you are on our email list to information. So tonight, like I said, we're focusing on whole grains. We're going to talk about their benefits, how to identify them. We're going to do a little bit of a show and tell with some different whole grains. And then we have 3 recipes that we are going to cook through so you can see how to use these in your life. So first of all, what the heck is a whole grain? This picture shows a processed grain on the right-hand side of the screen. So this is what we would think of as like white flour. And then on the other side, that is a whole grain. A whole grain is a seed, and it has all 3 parts of that seed when it's whole. It's got the bran, which is the outer coating of the seed that contains a lot of fiber and B vitamins and minerals like iron and zinc and magnesium. Then it's got that starchy endosperm, which is mostly carbohydrates and a little bit of protein. And then finally, it has the germ, which is where we get some healthy fats, some antioxidants, some B vitamins, some vitamin E. So a whole grain has all 3 of those parts, and the white grain just has the starch. So when we consume a whole grain, because it has fiber and all of these other vitamins and minerals in it, our blood sugar doesn't rise as quickly, and we have a stable, gradual rise in blood sugar. So we stay full longer. But when we consume the starchy white processed flour, our blood sugar rises really quickly, and then we crash. We can have energy levels and problems with blood sugar management. I mentioned fiber, and this is something that our team really loves to talk a lot about. A lot of the whole plant foods that are featured in this class and in that whole food plant forward dietary pattern are full of fiber. Fiber comes from plants. And the research shows us that when folks consume whole grains, so if you consume 2 to 3 servings of whole a day, compared to only consuming 1 or less serving, your risk for cardiovascular disease decreases 30%. And that's in a large part due to the fiber that's contained in whole grains and some of the other components like phytic acid and the polyphenols that can help lower inflammation. Fiber is also really important for helping us feel full or satiated, which can help prevent overeating and help us regulate our body weight. It's really important for the gut bacteria and making sure that we've got the right mix of gut bacteria, the healthy balance of gut bacteria in our digestive system that's then promoting positive immune health and ensuring that our bowel movements are regular. And then fiber is also extremely important for sugar control, as I mentioned. And whole grains have a bonus mineral, magnesium, that's also really beneficial for blood sugar. Finally, I think one of the cool, fun facts about whole grains and something that is often not talked about is that these whole grains have anti-cancer compounds in them. May have heard of phytic acid. It's gotten a bad rap as an anti-nutrient, but in fact, it actually has really anti-cancer properties, and whole grains are chock full of phytic acid. They're also full of resistant starch, which is basically fiber that our body doesn't digest. They have compounds like polyphenols and saponins, all of which have links to lowered risk for developing. So what are some examples? I'm going to throw some words up here on the screen, and then we're going to talk through some of these, but I just want you to start getting familiar with recognizing the words so you can identify whole grains on ingredients lists and packages. So we've got different types of rices, barley, various wheat products like wheat berries or einkorn or triticale, spelt, things like fonio, sorghum, quinoa, and millet. Those are all whole grains. This slide has a bunch of different asterisks on it. Anything that you see listed here that has an asterisk is naturally gluten. So if you're someone who needs to avoid gluten because you have celiac disease or you have a gluten intolerance, focus on those grains that have an asterisk. So turns out it's really actually easy to still consume whole grains. And if you are gluten-free, there's lots of options out there beyond the wheat, rye, and barley. Now, if you're in the grocery store, beyond buying the whole grain, the whole seed in a package, like what I'm going to show you in a minute, if you're buying a packaged product, how do we know it's whole grain? Just wanted to walk through some tips and tricks to help you as you're shopping in the grocery store to sleuth out those whole grain products. First and foremost, look for at the front of the package, look for words like whole, 100% whole grain, 100% whole wheat, stone ground, things like that. So look for those words at the front of the package and in the ingredients list. And then look for, you'll see on the slide here, there's a yellow stamp. That's from the Whole Grain Council. If that stamp is on the front of the package and it says 100% whole grain, that product is 100% whole grain. Okay, so you can look for that as a cue as well. Not all whole grain products have that stamp, but a lot of them do, so you can use that as a clue to help you identify those foods. When you're looking at the front of the package and you're looking at that ingredients list, steer clear of words like enriched or refined or degerminated. All of those indicate that that food is a processed grain and it's not whole, that the bran and that germ have been removed and we are just left with the starch. You can also turn the package around and look at that in nutrition facts panel, and I would immediately hone in on the fiber content. If that product has 3 grams or more of fiber per serving, more likely than not, it is a whole grain. This is still something you have to be careful about because sometimes fiber can be added, like inulin is often a fiber that's added into processed food products. So use the fiber content as a clue, identify how much fiber is in there, and then go to the ingredients list to make sure that fiber is coming from whole grain, fill in the blank. Okay. Then finally, like I said, look to that ingredients list. You can see here with this example, the very first ingredient is a whole grain wheat. That's exactly what we're looking for. Okay? So hopefully that helps you identify whole grains in the grocery store. I want to show you a few examples of whole grains in their whole form. You might see these in packages in the grocery store or in the bulk section. And so we're going to go over to, I'm going to stop this. We're going to move over here to our bowls of whole grains. First and foremost, let's start down here. So this is stone ground grits from yellow corn. So grits are a whole grain if you see stone ground in the packaging title. When they're coming from yellow corn, you're also getting some carotenoids, which is a nice added benefit. And carotenoids have been linked to lower breast cancer risk. They promote good eyesight. They also promote immune health. So you're getting a lot of bang for your buck with those grits. Here we have fonio, which I'm going to hold that up a little bit more to the screen here. It kind of looks like sand a little bit, which is funny, but this is a grain from West Africa that expands to 4 times its volume, and it takes about 5 minutes to cook. You boil water, you add the fonio in, and you just stir and let it sit, and it's done. So it's a really fast cooking whole grain, which is really nice. We've got some millet here. This is something you'll find in the grocery store in the bulk section or with other flours and grains. It is native to sub-Saharan South Africa, and it's used widely in Asian cuisine as well. We see it commonly in our birdseed mixes as well, so you may recognize it from that. It's got kind of a nutty flavor. It takes about 15 minutes to cook. 2 parts water, 1 part, 2 parts water, 1 part of the millet. Boil it for 15 minutes until all that water is absorbed, and you've got a really tasty side dish. We've got quinoa right here. Quinoa is really high in iron and protein. There's about 8 grams of protein per cup. Again, you're going to cook it for 15 to 20 minutes, 2 parts water, 1 part grain. Buckwheat is right here. This is another interesting one. Kind of got this triangle pyramid shape to it. It's got a really nutty and floral flavor. It's one of my favorite flours to use in baking, especially when paired with chocolate. I think it lends itself really well to a good chocolate chip cookie or a pancake. Might be familiar with that. This is also fairly fast cooking, 2 parts water, 1 part grain, 15 to 20 minutes until all that water is absorbed. We've got our monomen, which is the Anishinaabeg word for wild rice. This is true wild rice. It's this grassy, kind of gray color. If you see wild rice in the grocery store that's black, that is cultivated wild rice, likely from California. This wild rice, this kind of gray-green wild rice, is harvested by hand in the Great Lakes region. It's a really important staple food crop for indigenous communities here. So when you're buying it, look for hand-harvested wild rice from Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan. We've got some black rice or forbidden rice here, which is really high in anthocyanins, which are really helpful for cognitive function. Actually has more anthocyanins than blueberries, which I think is a food that we often associate with cognitive health. This is, you're going to do 2.5 cups of water to 1 part grain, and you're going to cook it for about 45 minutes. Our steel cut oats. So we've got steel cut and rolled oats here. The steel cut is basically this grain here. So pretend that's oat instead of wheat, but that's what the oat groat or like the oat seed like. And the steel cut is just chopped up pieces of that. So it's the least processed of all the oats. It does take a little bit longer to cook, so you're going to be cooking this for about 30 to 40 minutes, depending on the consistency that you want. Our rolled oats are that oat that have been steamed and then flattened with steel rollers. So still a great whole grain option. And that's going to cook in about 10 to 15 minutes. Finally, we've got our wheat berries here. These are really nutty and dense and a little bit on the sweet side. So I think they lend themselves really well to hearty salads. I think a lot of times we're mixing them with dried fruits or squash, kind of fall flavored foods. These are going to cook in about 45 to 60 minutes. 3 parts water to 1 part grain. All right, so now you know a lot of different, 10 different types of whole grains, and I want to show you a couple ways that you can use these for breakfast, because the recipes we're going to focus on next are more like lunch, dinner options. For breakfast, so most cultures around the world have some type of breakfast porridge. There's congee in Asian cuisine. We've got our oatmeal, which is a very like Northern European type dish. There's 3 different types of grains here. We've got an oatmeal with some hemp seeds for protein, some walnuts for some protein and healthy fats, and then we topped that with some berries. So when you're thinking about building a breakfast porridge or a grain bowl, think about the grain, think about a vegetable or a fruit, and think about a protein source. Okay, so protein from our nuts and seeds here. We got our berries and our whole grain of our oats. Here, I have that fonio. So you can see it kind of fluffed up quite a lot. It's really light in color. This is a very nutty whole grain, and I chose to make this savory. Yes, you can eat savory foods for breakfast. We've got some spinach, we've got some nutritional yeast for some cheesiness, tomatoes, and then some protein coming from pepitas or pumpkin seeds, old pumpkin seeds. And here we've got some amaranth. This is a grain that we didn't have on our show and tell board, but it is slightly smaller in size than the quinoa, but a little bit bigger in size than the fonio, and it also takes about 15 minutes to cook, and it gets this kind of glassy, smooth look to it, and but it maintains a nice crunchy texture. So that's kind of fun if you enjoy that type of texture. So here we put a pear, some cinnamon, and some flaxseed on top of this, and then for some protein, I would just pour some soy milk on here. There you go. 3 different options for breakfast, your whole grains. All right, looks like there's no questions so far, so we're gonna go ahead and move into our very first recipe of the night. We are going to make a millet peanut pilaf. And we're gonna start with cutting an onion. So this is something, I'm gonna adjust my cutting board view here. All right, so you should be seeing our cutting board right here. This recipe calls for 1/2 of a red onion. So when I'm holding a knife, because I don't know that we've talked about this yet together, I am pinching the blade near the handle between my finger and my thumb, okay, like so. And then I'm wrapping my three fingers around the blade. Okay. So, and then that grip is giving me good control of this knife. It's giving me more stability. It's keeping my fingers protected. It's protecting my elbow and my wrist actually, and giving me better leverage. Okay. And then when I'm using this knife, I am going to, this is a chef's knife, and it's got kind of this curved blade. We're making rocking motions with this knife like this. Okay, I'm not sawing, I'm gently rocking using that curve of the blade, okay? When it comes to an onion, what I like to do is lay it down on its side with its hairy root ends facing one way and its papery stem end facing one way. I slice off that stem end to get a nice flat, stable surface. Set that down, and then I slice the onion in half from the root end down to the cutting board. And I'm only using half of this onion in the recipe tonight, so I'm going to set this other half aside, and I'm going to peel this kind of thin, rubbery layer off. That's not going to add good texture. I want to get all the papery bits off. Okay. And then I'm going to follow these lines. So you'll notice when you open up an onion, there's all these grooves across the onion. So I'm going to use those as guidelines for cutting. And I'm going to take the tip of my chef's knife, and I'm going to angle my knife all the way around the perimeter of the onion, using those lines as my guidelines for spacing. And I'm going to slice down to the cutting board, but I'm going to make sure that I leave about a finger's width from the root end that I'm not slicing, so that all of my little slices stay intact. Okay, and you don't have to be perfect with it, but just roughly even. And now I'm going to slice the opposite direction, and my non-knife holding hand is always going to be in this kind of claw shape to keep my fingertips away from my knife blade. Okay, and I'm going to make evenly spaced slices down my onion. And when I get to the little end that I didn't slice, I'm just going to take my tip around like so. And there we go. We've got a diced onion. Okay, so we're going to turn our skillet on. It's at medium heat right now. We're going to let that warm up while we work on our pepper. So another vegetable that's really helpful to know how to cut, because it's often used in the base of a lot of recipes, is a bell pepper. There are lots of ways to cut it. The way I like to do it is to lay it down on its side and to slice off the top. We're still going to use this, so don't worry. And then turn it around and then slice off kind of the bumpy end. That way I've got a nice stable pepper. My seeds are intact here. And then I'm just going to make kind of square cuts down the sides of the pepper with my knife close enough to the edge so that I'm leaving this white pith attached to the seeds, because I don't want that white pithy part. Okay, so you'll get something that kind of looks like this. And then all of your seeds are contained and they're not all over your cutting board. I know there have been many times that I have cooked and worked with peppers that I just get seeds stuck to everything, and that is never an enjoyable thing for me. So I prefer that method of cutting. There's also other sorts of different ways, so if you have a method that works for you, go for it. Next, because we're getting to a dice, I like to stack those squared off pieces on top of each other and then make evenly spaced cuts, so I'm getting nice little matchsticks. Now, if you were doing a little veggie tray or something, you could leave these pepper slices just like this. They're great in the lunchbox. I'm going to pile them up and slice the other direction to get to my dice. Okay, I'm going to use my non-knife hand to kind of try to hold all these pieces together. And again, making that rocking motion with the knife. All right, so there are my pepper and my onion pieces. I've got a couple tablespoons of olive oil that are going into my pan. And then I'm going to add in my onion. And I want to hear that sizzle. I don't know if you're hearing that sizzle, but that's what I want to hear when I add in my onions and my peppers to the pan. That helps me know that that pan was heated appropriately. So we're just going to give that a quick stir. The nice thing about using these red onions as opposed to a yellow onion, red onions are a little bit more pungent, so we're going to get a little bit more of that oniony flavor, but you notice the color, right? Kind of that purple red. We're also getting those anthocyanins I talked about, which are beneficial for cognitive health. And you may notice that I talk a lot about different compounds that are found in the variety of foods that we feature in this class. And I hope that you take those away as fun facts, but really, I hope that you just see how beneficial a variety of foods are for our health, so that really, if you're just eating the rainbow and eating a diverse dietary pattern that's full of these plant foods, you're going to be getting all of these compounds that are helping prevent a whole host of different diseases and supporting your optimal well-being. So don't worry so much about remembering those little details. The main thing is to eat a variety of these colorful plant foods. All right, so we're going to let this saute for a couple minutes here. Okay. The other nice thing about these onions, in addition to those anthocyanins, because they're red, onions have a lot of different sulfur compounds. That's what makes us cry. That's what really imparts this pungent flavor to the onion. And these sulfur compounds help our body with detoxification. They're really potent antioxidants, which protect our cells from damage. And when we cook them, the concentration of those sulfur compounds actually increases. So this is an example of how cooking helps us make the most out of the food and get more bang for our buck with our ingredients. All right, so you can start to see the color on these onions is lightening a little bit. They're becoming a little glassy and translucent. That's kind of what we're going for. So we're next going to add in, I've got 1 clove of garlic that was cut, like minced, I should say, be more specific, as a minced garlic clove, and I'll show you how we got there in our next recipe. And then I've got 1/2 cup of peanuts that we're just going to kind of toast in this mix. If you have a peanut allergy, you could swap in a different nut, or some sunflower seeds, some raw unsalted sunflower seeds would be good here too. The peanuts just start adding a really nice texture, and this recipe, it comes from, it was inspired by one in Bryant Terry's Afro Vegan Soul. So there's a lot of kind of West African influences in the flavors, and peanuts are a common ingredient in many African recipes. Got that going. Next, we are going to add in our millet. So this is the millet when it's cooked, and we cooked 1 cup of millet. Break that up a little bit. Stir that around, and then I've got about 3/4 of a pint of cherry tomatoes that were sliced in half. Little stir and let that cook for a minute. So I mentioned that millet is a common ingredient in a variety of Asian cuisines. It's common in recipes from sub-Saharan Africa. Another fun fact about millet is that it's full of catechins, which are a compound that are anti-inflammatory and are neuroprotective. So when we're thinking about promoting cognitive health and cognitive function, catechins, which are also found in things like green tea, are super beneficial for cognitive health and well-being. All right, so we're gonna add some spices now and some seasonings. Now that everything's mixed in there, I've got a half a teaspoon of salt, and then this is a tablespoon of chili powder, which is usually paprika and some type of like chili, like pepper, like a cayenne. Often there's garlic in there. I've got a tablespoon of coconut aminos, which is a soy sauce alternative. It's a little bit sweeter than soy sauce, and it has a little bit less sodium. So if you're watching your sodium, then the coconut aminos can be a really good option for you. And also, if you're watching your sodium, you could go ahead and omit that little bit of salt that we added here. And then, even though that chili powder has some paprika, we want to amp up that smokiness a little bit. So we're going to add in another quarter teaspoon of smoked paprika. Give that a nice stir. And then finally, we're going to finish with some lemon juice. So I've got a couple tablespoons of lemon juice. This is going to add some nice brightness and zing to this dish. If you're cooking and you're feeling like, ooh, this is kind of flat, try some acid, try some lemon juice, try some vinegar, and that'll usually help brighten and liven up your dish. There we go. That is pretty much done. The other nice thing I like about this dish, millet can be a little bit on the drier side. So using it in this way where we're adding tomatoes that are kind of juicy, we're adding some ingredients like the lemon juice and the coconut aminos where we're getting some liquid in there, I think can really help keep this from being a dry and kind of texturally challenging dish. It all kind of comes together really nicely. So there you go. This is a great side dish. You could throw some tempeh in here or some black beans or chickpeas and make this a full meal. You've got a really delicious, very flavorful millet option to add into your repertoire. All right. Our next recipe, we're going to focus on buckwheat. So I'm going to change gears here for a second. Next recipe, we've got a buckwheat pilaf. And we are going to start, I've got my skillet on. We're going to add a couple tablespoons of olive oil. Again, and if this is something like, say you have heart disease and you're really working to lower your fat intake, you could do a water saute here. So instead of that couple tablespoons of olive oil, you would do about 3 tablespoons of water. And then we're going to add in our onion. Okay. And this was 1 medium yellow onion that was diced. Just like I showed you with that red onion, we follow the exact same process. Okay. And we're going to let that cook for a couple of minutes. While that's cooking, I want to show you how to mince a clove of garlic. Another really important skill for the base of many recipes. This garlic is going to add a lot of flavor. So I've got my clove of garlic. To help me peel it, I'm going to slice off this kind of flat, hard stem, or excuse me, root end. Okay, and that's actually going to help peel off some. And then I'm going to take the knife and I'm going to have it be parallel to the cutting board. And I'm going to place the heel of the knife on top of the garlic clove and take the heel of my hand and just gently press down. You don't have to slam. All you have to do is gently press down and it'll crack the skin, paper right off, and you've got your nice peeled garlic clove. Now I'm going to keep the tip of my knife on the cutting board, and I'm going to just make thin slices, that rocking motion. I'm going to gather those slices together, and I'm just going to keep kind of going back and forth over them. So I'm going to keep the tip of my knife down on the cutting board, rock over that pile, gather. And you're just going until the pieces are the size that you would prefer to eat. So garlic is a really potent, pungent flavor, and we mince foods like garlic, and often you'll see ginger calling for a mince. So we mince foods that have intense flavor so that we're getting that intense flavor spread evenly throughout our dish, and we're not just biting into a whole garlic clove. All right, so that's about the size that I want. Typically, what I like to do when I'm working with garlic is mince it and then let it sit for about 10 minutes before I use it in my recipe. And why I do that is because that allows a compound called allicin to fully form. It interacts, there's some enzymatic reactions that happen, and that allicin is a really potent antioxidant, anti-inflammatory compound. For the sake of time, we're just going to add this right into our onion. But know when you're cooking at home, if you have the opportunity to mince your garlic and then let it sit for 10 minutes, that's going to up the nutritional power of it. All right, so into our skillet, the garlic goes. Notice that when I'm scraping, I'm using the non-blade side of my knife to scrape that garlic into my skillet. We don't want to use the blade because that'll dull it, and a dull knife is a dangerous knife. All right, stir that around here. And I got a couple other ingredients that we're going to add in. So we've got some mushrooms that are going into this dish. This is, these are some button mushrooms, some baby portobello mushrooms. You could use that as well. To slice them, I like to kind of pop off the stem, set that side down that I popped the stem on. It's a little bit more stable, and then make evenly spaced slices. Oh, that's how I get to my, and then I like to just kind of slice these stem in half. I like to use them. Some people don't, because I think they're a little woody. They don't bother me, but you choose what works for you. If you need to clean off dirt on your mushrooms, just take a piece of paper towel and gently brush them. Don't run them under water, because then they'll get a little soggy when you go to cook them. So just a nice gentle brush with a paper towel usually does the trick. All right, we are going to add in our mushrooms. Mushrooms are a really good source of beta-glucan, which are a type of soluble fiber that supports immune health. And soluble fiber is also found in those oats, those rolled oats and the steel cut oats that we were looking at earlier. And soluble fiber can help our bodies basically mop up excess cholesterol, so it can be helpful for managing our cholesterol levels. Oh, there's a question in the chat about store-bought garlic. Great question. Thank you. Oh, the store-bought chopped garlic. That's a great question, Sue. Thanks for asking. I think that's great in a pinch. You could also use the garlic powder. But if you have the ability to chop it at home, you're going to get a little bit more nutritional benefit from it that way. A lot of the store-bought garlic, they also add sometimes some preservatives. So again, okay in a pinch, or you could use like a garlic powder. That would be totally fine. But from like a nutrition perspective, the whole real thing is usually a better option. But thanks for that question. All right, so we got a little bit of salt with about a quarter teaspoon. We're gonna toss in here, and then we've got some kale. So this is a small bunch of kale that has been destemmed, and I'm going to show you how I got here. This is our kale stem. I'm going to hold it in one hand, and I'm going to take my other hand and kind of pinch the stem and slide down as I'm pulling the opposite direction with my right hand. Okay, I'll show you that again. So my right hand's holding the stem, my left hand is moving down the stem, so I'm pulling my hands in opposite directions, pulling the leaves off. And now I'm just going to rip these into small bite-sized pieces. All right, and I've got my kale. The kale is going into my skillet here. And we're going to let that cook until the kale is nice and wilted. Another question. Thank you. Oh, and how many mushrooms? Thank you for asking that question. So we used one of those 8-ounce packages of mushrooms. You could use button mushrooms or the baby portobello mushrooms. Any of those would be fine, but one 8-ounce package sliced. And it looks like Diane, oh yeah, that's totally fine, Diane. She purchases already peeled garlic and you put it in the freezer and you chop it frozen. Totally fine. That seems like a really great time-saving tip. I love little shortcuts like that. Okay, so you can see our kale here is starting to wilt a little bit. We just want to go until most of that kale is starting to wilt and look very bright green. So you can see, this right here, this piece, as opposed to this kind of pale, dusty looking green. So that's going to be about like 3 to 5 minutes. The kale is adding a lot of folate, which is really important for pregnant people. It's really important for detoxification and DNA repair. Also adding some magnesium, like I mentioned earlier, is helpful for blood sugar control. All right, that's looking pretty close. So we're going to add our last couple ingredients. We've got 1 cup of buckwheat that was cooked ahead of time. Remember, that takes about 15 minutes, and we got 2 parts of water to 1 part of buckwheat. So we use 2 cups of boiling water with our 1 cup of buckwheat, cooked that. That's how we got here. Buckwheat has a compound called rutin in it. It's actually, buckwheat is the highest source of rutin, and rutin is another antioxidant. It's been shown to be helpful for high blood pressure, for preventing cardiovascular disease, also been shown to be neuroprotective, so helping prevent cognitive decline. All right, finally, I'm going to finish this. The recipe that you have doesn't have this, but I'm adding in some chickpeas for some protein. So this is a 1 skillet meal here. We're going to just cook that until that's warmed up. And then I really like buckwheat because it's got kind of a floral, nutty flavor. It's pretty earthy too. I think it pairs really well with a tahini dressing. So I mixed together some tahini, which is sesame seed paste, lemon juice, and a little bit of water until it was the consistency that I like. And I'm just going to drizzle that on top of here. You could also garnish this with some parsley, which adds some brightness and adds a really nice, beautiful, bright green color. So it adds bright flavor and it adds bright color. All right, so that is our final skillet dish. We're now going to move on to our very last recipe, which will on the cutting board over here. We're going to make a tabbouleh. Tabbouleh is a Middle Eastern dish that typically has a base of bulgur. And I'm going to turn off this camera so you've got one camera to focus on. Bear with me one second while I get my... Okay, so you should just be seeing the cutting board. Okay, perfect. So instead of using bulgur wheat, we are using quinoa. You could also use millet here. I think this is another great use case for it. So we've got 1 cup of dry millet that was cooked with 2 cups of boiling water until you can see these little kind of curly white pieces on the outside until all the water is absorbed and we see every grain having those kind of curly cues on them. That's how we know it's cooked. So we've got that. We're going to make a quick dressing that's going to go on here with some of our veggies. So I need... We've got a 1/3 cup of olive oil. We've got 3 tablespoons of lemon juice. We have a 1/2 teaspoon of salt and a 1/4 teaspoon of coriander, which is cilantro seeds ground up, and then a pinch of cinnamon, which I feel like is kind of the surprise ingredient in this dish that really brings it together. A pinch is about 1/8 of a teaspoon if you want to measure. Okay, so we're just gonna whisk that together real quick. Set that aside, come back to that in a minute. I've got 2 Roma tomatoes that I diced up that are going to go into our bowl, and we're going to work with 1 more. I'm going to show you how I got it. So I'm using Roma tomatoes because they're a little bit meatier and they've got less liquid and juice in them. So I'm going to slice off the end, the stem end of my knife here. I'm going to slice it in half. Whenever you're working with any sort of produce, anything that you're cutting, you want to try to get to a flat surface because that's stable. And we're going to make a couple nice slices here. And we're going to go the other direction. And again, we're just kind of trying to get to a nice rough dice. And my knife is not super sharp. You could use a serrated knife, so the knife with the teeth, that'll help you get through the skins of the tomato. We have got some cucumber here. This is an English cucumber or a Persian cucumber. It's got a very thin skin. It's not quite as bitter as the standard cucumbers you'd grow in your garden. We're going to use about half of it here. I'm going to trim off the end. I'm going to slice it in half. So I get to my flat, stable surface. I'm going to slice it in half again long ways. And then I'm going to make even cuts. So you're looking for about a cup of diced cucumber. This dish, one of the reasons why I love it is you're packing in a lot of vegetables. You're getting in that whole grain. It's really bright and fresh. You can have this just as a side dish. You can turn it into a whole meal by adding, I really like it with some sauteed tempeh, which is a soy protein we'll work with in one of our upcoming classes. It's also really great with just some chickpeas tossed into it. So there's our cucumbers. We've got 2 scallions that are going into our bowl here. Okay. Those have been sliced. We're using the greens and the whites. We've got 1 clove of garlic that was minced. Okay. And then I've got, the recipe calls for 3 cups. I've already chopped 2 cups of parsley. I'm going to show you how I got there. So this is our bunch of parsley. This recipe, like I said, it calls for 3 cups of parsley. It's about 2 bunches of parsley. So I'm going to slice off the tops here, gather this together in a nice little pile. And This technique is called chiffonading. It's a fancy French word for like slicing into ribbons. I'm just making these like thin ribbon cuts down my pile parsley, and I am gathering that all together. And I'm just cutting this until it's the size that I want. So you see some tabbouleh with really large parsley pieces, and you'll see some tabbouleh where the parsley is really, really finely minced. This is a call that's up to you and your preferences. Okay, so we're gonna add that into our bowl. This is a dish that it's great to eat with good friends who will tell you when you have something stuck in your teeth because the parsley will get stuck in your teeth. So make sure you're eating it in good company so you don't make a fool of yourself when you go out into the world again. We've got some mint now that we're gonna also chiffonade. So this is about probably a quarter of a bunch of mint that we've picked just the leaves off of. And I'm gonna put those into a little pile and then make a nice little roll. And this will be easier to see that chiffonading that I was talking about. So we're gonna keep the tip of our knife on the cutting board, make kind of thin little ribbons. So here's that thin little ribbon, the chiffonade, which you can use. Those are nice little garnish pieces. I really love mint mixed with berries. That's been a favorite thing of mine recently. A little bit of berry, drizzle some honey on top, and that's a really feels like a very decadent dessert. I'm gonna go the opposite direction, so I'm getting a mince. Okay, and then that goes into my bowl. So I've got all my things in my bowl. Last but not least, I'm adding in that dressing. And then we're just stirring until everything is nicely coated. Like I said, you could use the bulgur, which is, the traditional recipe. You could use millet here. There's lots of different options for changing this up. All right, and there you go. You've got some beautiful, fresh tabbouleh, a little burst of kind of, I feel like spring bright flavors in the middle of winter is never a bad thing. Like I said, you can make it a whole meal by adding some protein like beans or tempeh. I just want to show you one more thing. I've got a slide that has, oh, and Carol, great question. Nope, there's no difference between the flat leaf or the curly parsley. I prefer to work with the flat leaf parsley. That's just like a personal preference of mine. But you could totally use the curly parsley in place of the flat leaf if you would like. So I just want to share one more quick thing with you all. We've got some QR codes for our, let me do it, there we go. We've got some QR codes for the website. So the class website is where we have all of the recipes and some additional resources for each class. So like for this class, I'm going to be posting the recipes alongside a cooking chart that'll give you the various water to grain ratios for both using a pressure cooker and cooking on the stove top, along with some additional ideas. So if you scan that QR code or type in that link below, that'll take you to that website. And then I also wanted to make sure everyone knew that we're offering a free lifestyle medicine class once a month. It's 30 minutes. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about the other pillars of lifestyle medicine and how they connect to health and disease prevention, treatment, and reversal, that's a really great class to attend. You can scan that QR code to sign up. Again, it's free, it's 30 minutes, and then our presenter Emily will talk through some various options if you want to continue your lifestyle medicine education. So with that, we're only a couple minutes over, and I feel like we covered a lot of ground. I hope you are feeling inspired and you're feeling excited to try some of these whole grains. If you choose to try one of the recipes that we made in class tonight, or you just try a new to you whole grain for the first time, I'd really love to hear about it. So please send us an email at lifestylemedicine@trinity-health.org, and I'll happily receive that message and respond. If you also have any questions that we didn't answer tonight, please also send an email to that email address as well. Take good care. Thanks for hanging out with us, and happy cooking.